Andrew Clennell. The Prime Minister had his first and much anticipated one-on-one meeting with President Biden.
Indeed, Kieran, that's a siege. That's what we're seeing there, by the way. It's turned into a siege, so there you go. But the first bilateral meeting between Scott Morrison and Joe Biden in New York, and the two big issues to come up with China and climate change, it seems. We know there was a trilateral meeting with Boris Johnson where the nuclear subs deal was hatched at Carbis Bay in Cornwall in June. This is the first bilateral between these two leaders. Let's have a look at the scenes from this morning's bilat.
Well, Scott, Mr. Prime Minister, it's great to have you here. It's good to see my friend Prime Minister Morrison and today in New York, and I look forward to welcoming him to the White House on Friday, I guess, when the Quad meets, which will be a good in-person meeting. The United States has no closer or more reliable ally than Australia. We have a big agenda to discuss today, starting with our partnership to advance our vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific. And this conversation that we're going to continue with Japan, India on Friday, and the first in-person Quad leaders meeting. It's a historic event. The United States and Australia are working in lockstep on the challenges that I laid out today in my speech to the United Nations, ending COVID, addressing the climate crisis, defending democracy, shaping the rules of the road for the 21st century. Because I meant what I said, we are at an inflection point. Things are changing. We either grasp the change and deal with it, or we're going to be left behind, all of us.
And the United States and Australia have always shared a partnership that is about a world order that favours freedom. And that's why we've always stood together. And in pursuing that freedom, it of course goes to our security interests. But more than that, it goes to global prosperity. It goes to global freedom, the freedom of our seas, the freedom of our region. It goes to addressing the great global challenges of climate change, a new energy economy, and a very, very challenging future, but one that our partnership, I have no doubt, will be able to address. Mr. President, I want to thank you for your leadership and your focus on the Indo-Pacific region. There's no doubt that you get it.
So the PM says Joe Biden gets it when it comes to China. The two leaders met not in the Oval Office where they'll meet with Indian and Japanese leaders in the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue on Friday, but on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. At that gathering, there was a tense exchange between the European Council President Charles Michel and Scott Morrison, where Michel seems to have a clear shot at the PM over his treatment of the French on the subs deal.
It's a good opportunity to get together today to talk about recent developments and but particularly more how we can work together with the European Union in the Indo-Pacific, where Europe has such a strong investment and such a keen interest to the security of the region.
Well, thank you for your message, but as you know, for us, transparency and loyalty are fundamental principles.
After transparency and loyalty. From the Prime Minister's press conference this morning, an acknowledgement that the decision has been difficult for the French, but hopes negotiations with Europe over trade can carry on. These issues aren't on the same track, the PM says.
There is an understanding that these are issues that aren't on the same track. We've been working on the trade issues for many years now. We're not alone in that. The Canadians have been doing the same. It's no easy thing to land a trade deal with Europe, and there are many complex issues that Minister Teen will continue to work through. Of course, there's understandable recognition of the disappointment for France. There was never going to be an easy way to not proceed with this contract. To think there was, I think, would be naive. Of course it's disappointing news, but it's a contractual arrangement that we had. We're acting consistent with the contract, and we will meet all our obligations in relation to the contract in terms of the options we've exercised, and the opportunity to explain those matters, I think, was reassuring that Australia would be doing the right thing in terms of our obligations.
Still unclear the scale of that compensation. Now, we revealed on Sunday Agenda during an interview with Defence Minister Peter Dutton that the prospect of leasing submarines ahead of building our own with US technological help in the 2030s was on the cards. There were reports in the UK last night in The Times that British submarines are likely to station in Australia in the near future. Here is Peter Dutton from Sunday Agenda revealing the short-term option, and Scott Morrison from Today asked about the British option.
The short answer is yes. I mean, there's all of that discussion to take place in the next 12 to 18 months, and already, obviously, I've met with a number of my counterparts here, from the Secretary down, in terms of those that are making decisions, and we'll have further discussions with the Brits as well.
How concerned are the Americans about a potential invasion of Taiwan, that China would want to do that?
Well, Andrew, I think we only need to look at the words of the Chinese in relation to Taiwan. The Communist Party has been very clear about their intent, and obviously there's a significant concern about that intent here in Washington, but not just here in the United States. So, as you know, there's been a German frigate. The Brits have sent their assets out to the Indo-Pacific. NATO has been concerned. They were shouted down by the CCP, but NATO has expressed concern about what's happening in the Indo-Pacific.
Prime Minister, on the submarines, the United Kingdom has indicated that they may station up to 3 nuclear submarines in Australia. Is that an option, and is there also an option for a similar arrangement with the United States? Are these options that Australia is looking at and may come up in the near future?
Today we had the opportunity to get some clear early priorities on what we wanted to achieve under the Orcus arrangement. And of course, going through that 18-month process and making sure that we have a right-sized option for Australia to be able to pursue the right scale, to mean we can move as quickly as possible and get that capability in place. But in addition to that, and a lot of the work that Minister Dutton has been doing, is to work to see how we can bring other elements to that capability in an even sooner time frame. Now, that can involve the very things that you're talking about. There are no commitments on that as yet.
Scott Morrison also confirming that neither the US nor Australia is looking for a war.
The President felt compelled today, Prime Minister of the UN, to assure the world that America wasn't leading its allies and Australia into a Cold War with China. It's obviously he sees the seriousness of this matter in those terms. Are you confident that that can be avoided without diplomatic contact with Beijing?
I am confident that we can avoid the conflict that we all want to avoid. And I believe that includes not only Australia and the many countries in our region and our friends across ASEAN, but I believe that extends to our partners in the Quad, Japan and India, as we'll discuss later this week, as it indeed does to China. I have no doubt that that's what we are all seeking to achieve. I'm encouraged by the President's efforts in seeking that direct engagement and having that direct and honest engagement with China.